Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hermitage Dhamma. I just enjoyed a live session with Ajahn Suchito. He's giving a retreat right now that's ending today, and so I've been really enjoying that time with him and the virtual community that's created. Right now, Ton Dhammawaro's parents are visiting, so that's quite nice. It's always very enjoyable to meet amongst parents and spend some time with them. And so that's, it's very beautiful, especially since his parents are practitioners and are practicing the path with him. They sit retreats and are very happy that their son is in robes. So it's good to counter blessings, to try to remember all of those good things that are in our lives, and just to remember all of the good forces that we have that are encouraging us along the path, and how helpful that is. Helpful to recollect all the goodness that our parents have given us, our teachers, the Kalyanamita we have in our lives, the spiritual friendship, and just to try to remember how valuable those things are, and also to have a sense of respect for them in terms of acknowledging that it's not necessarily the case that we might have all of these good conditions that we have. And so for some people, they might say, well, I don't have very good conditions, but if you take a look, there are surely some things that have very good qualities in one's lives. There are memories of people, even if the circumstances we're in are very difficult, we can always kind of remember some goodness in our life, and to try to bring that up and emphasize that along our path. Because if we're not seeing the good, then our minds tend to go with the bad. They tend to sink into the mud. And how we can elevate ourselves is to, really recount these blessings in our lives, all of the goodness that we have. For me, it's always been these teachers, and of course recollecting all of the things I had before I came to Buddhism, my family, and all of the kindness of my parents and my siblings, grandparents, nieces and nephews, and kind friends I've had throughout my life. But after entering the Sangha, that also really amped things up in terms of goodness. Just being able to associate with so many people who are on the path of the Buddhist teachings. And the teachers are an enormous benefit for us, our teachers that we have, as I've mentioned. So just being in the presence, for example, as I was just the past hour with Lumpur Suchito, it's just quite a grounding experience we have when we're with a person who we trust and who we have faith in. And I think that's important to try to bring up that faith and try to emphasize that in our practice, because that buoys our own faith in ourselves. We see what the potential is for a human being. We keep the Buddha in mind, and we know, oh yeah, this is the potential. This is the potential I have. This isn't just a potential for a nun or a monk or some other person who's much more highly practiced than me, highly attained. I could never do anything. I'm just such a lowly person. Well, The Buddha talks about that as an actual conceit when you're comparing yourself with others, and you just fill in the blank "I am," even if the "I am" is a sense of something lower than others. It's still a conceit because it's based on the "I am" principle, which, for many of us, that's where the delusion comes from. I am this, I am that, and we have an identification. But if we more look to our actions as what is our guiding principles in life, our understanding of how we're doing and what we're doing, then we can kind of depersonalize that nature. And so we have to be careful, for example, with the other people in our lives, also not to make them into objects of this same kind of identification, who they are and what they are, and we tend to make them into permanent entities and solidify them. This person who could never do me any wrong, and then we get disappointed when that actually happens. And that can be quite heartbreaking. Or a person who we think could never do better, or who's always going to be the same, and we are surprised then when we're totally wrong. Unfortunately, the one of the things that happens is that we reproduce those effects in other people. So we can sometimes, unfortunately, encourage people just because we do identify with them as being a particular way, and then we encourage that because we like stability. We like people to be stable and not change so much. So even sometimes when people are doing better than how we've known them, strangely enough, we can kind of be afraid of that, or who's this person? I don't know who they are anymore. And so we don't always encourage them to change. And this is the same for ourselves, how we look at ourselves, how we think about ourselves. And I think this is why the world of meditation can become so murky for us, is we are constantly moving in towards to a sense of identifying with who and what we are, how we're doing, what we're doing. We're kind of filling in report cards for ourselves. Oh, I got an F today again. Or, it can be nice to give ourselves A pluses, but if we're constantly comparing ourselves, then we have to be careful with that. But at the same time, we can look at ourselves and say, well, I'm trying to do the best I can, and that's surely better than just saying I'm the worst. So I think it's important to try to have an examination of how it is that we're boxing ourselves in, we're keeping ourselves into a particular pattern of who we are and what we are. And I think all of us knows this, how we are sort of self-speak, how we speak to ourselves. And to me, this is no more evident than in formal practice when we're really trying to focus ourselves, going internally and noticing what our experience is. And how I would characterize that as slightly different is we have distractions. So when we're not dealing with our formal practice, it can be an ideal that the states are the same, the experience is the same, but usually it's not, because coming from unenlightened minds, it's not always the case. For example, for myself to really see like, when I'm dealing with another person or dealing with an activity or just busyness or whatever it might be, the mind just tends to be more distracted. It doesn't have the energy to devote itself towards noticing things as clearly or as much. So surely that's a possibility, that's an emphasis that we want to try to have as much clarity and focus and wisdom as we can throughout our day. But it's harder. And so we don't want to put obstacles in our way, and that's important. We want to make sure that we're not, as I was speaking about yesterday, and something that one of the supporters who was present at Yoga Samadhi mentioned, just that idea of busyness, keeping ourselves busy all day long, and that there's a sense that if we're not busy, there's something wrong there. And we can do that in our formal practice as well. I gotta get busy. I have to focus on these particular chants, and then I have to know, everything that I have to deal with my Pali. I have to try to understand what this teaching means and what that sutta is, and I have to memorize this and do that, and then I'm not sure if I'm doing it all right, and I better get it all right. I have to. Or I must. And then what's on the other side of that often is, if I don't, what will happen? What's the result of that? And so we want to try to really examine that for ourselves, and to understand what is the home we're coming back to? What is the quality we're trying to come back to in our minds? A sense of peace and clarity. Ultimately, it's understanding how we're causing ourselves stress, how we're causing ourselves discontent, and how to uproot ourselves from that. And that is a sense of learning right effort. What's the right amount? What's the right way to look at our experience, to examine it, how to approach it? I think oftentimes when I look at my own approach to meditation and the pitfalls or the problems I have, it's just that confusion of not being sure, well, what do I do with this particular problem in the mind? And so we are learning a skill. We are learning something that we can potentially have mastery over. How do we deal with our particular greed that arises? And when we go for that greed and we move into a sense of coveting or wanting and trying to get, then where does our mind go? How does that feel? What's the experience of that? And unfortunately, once we get to know once we're seeing the experience of that, we might see it's quite unwholesome, then we add on to it. Oh, I'm such a greedy person. I'm so hopeless. When am I ever going to get it right? So that compounds the problem of watching, because we're not watching, we're criticizing. And so we always want to try to be aware of, what's going on here, what's going on in this moment. And for example, the more we can be aware of that critical quality that we have of ourselves, the more we're removing that sort of third and fourth arrow that we're adding on top of our experience. It's one thing to act out of greed or act out of anger or be confused about something, but it's another thing to then criticize ourselves and say, oh, this is this isn't right, what I'm doing, and then we get back into the identification. So in order to see clearly, we have to be quite aware of this, of the tricks we pull on ourselves, the sort of blinds that we cover over. It's like being in a theater and the curtains close and then it reopens again, and we're not sometimes aware that that's actually happened. There's a new scene, there's a new story, there's a new future or past, and we're in a thought world. We're born into a thought world again. And then when we become aware of that, then all of a sudden we move into another world of blame or frustration or difficulty. So it's just continually coming back to that, what is known right now? That's the home base. Can I be aware of this moment? Oh, I have such a muddled mind. I can't. Oh, That's awareness of the muddled mind. That's awareness of the I can't do this mind. And we do want to build confidence around that. I remember my mom, when I was a little child, used to read me, one of my favorite books was The Little Engine That Could, which some of you might smile remembering that. It was about this little engine, this train engine, that it just wasn't very strong and kind of new, young, and there were so many other steam engines, so many other train engines that were better than him, and they could really outperform him in so many ways. So there was quite a comparison to that. And eventually the little engine just learned to rely on himself, and that's where this can. I think I can. I think I can. And then just moving from I think I can moved to, do you remember? I know I can. And as a little kid, I think it was nice because it was a young engine. It was quite special to see this. Just as a little kid, kind of seeing the same quality of this little engine that could. But that sense of I know I can come up with us in our practice. And it's important to also, acknowledge the I think I can. I think I can do this. But when we gain more and more skill in what we're doing, then we're moving into knowing we can handle any kind of situation. And so that's what we're sort of, what satta is for. That's the meaning of faith in the Buddha's teaching, is that we are gaining in faith, we're gaining in understanding. And confidence arises because of this. So, okay, I remember how this caused me problems last time. I'm not moving in this direction. The mind is doing its usual thing, and I'm not going to follow it there because it's going towards in an unskillful way. So that's the potential we have. We have this potential to learn from our pitfalls, our mistakes, and to just be okay with these mistakes, to be okay with our disappointments. I can know for myself, in much of my past, there can be sort of this obsessiveness with having caused pain or harm, and how difficult it can be to let go of that. Especially when there's nothing you can do about it. If for example you've lost a friend or something like that, there's really nothing that's sometimes that can be done, and so that can cause a lot of worry and anxiety. One of the unwholesome ways I see that operating is in the effect of like, I'm no longer perceived as a good person in this other person's eyes. We can feel that with our teachers or people who are very important to us. Unfortunately, though, that's not skillful. It's not really helpful to be concerned about our image of ourselves to others when it comes to self-valuing or self-evaluating, because that's the problem. Is we can be concerned in a way that's wholesome, and that would be like, may my actions of body, speech, and mind not actually bring another person's actions of body, speech, and mind in a sort of towards a negative course in their life. So we do want to be careful of that. But in terms of evaluating myself as like, I'm not a good person because this person says I'm not a good person, that's where the problem occurs. That's where we have to be very careful with that. And just to know that unsettling experience of, oh, this is how it feels to place my well-being and identity into, like, or have it based on how another person feels about me. The other way that I'm talking about, where we're concerned with others based on our own behavior, that we don't want to lead others astray, doesn't have that self-consciousness about it, or that evaluating from another person. I hope you can see the difference in those two, because they're quite, one is quite helpful, I think, to our practice. Being concerned with others and their welfare, based on how we are, how we conduct ourselves, versus being concerned with how people feel about us, based on our concern and our welfare. And how, when we are concerned in that latter way, where we're evaluating ourselves, how just the amount of energy and time and difficulty, that occurs because of that. There's just so much that we take away from our lives, I think, when we evaluate ourselves, or we allow our emotions to kind of be moved based on how other people think about us. And it's very common. Again, then we start chiding ourselves. Why do I do that? I'm so horrible. Well, it's just back into the same problem again. But just being aware of it is quite different. Well, there's that mind that's going towards worry and fear about how others think about me. And how does that feel? And what is that like? Why do I want to do that to myself? Why do I want to allow my mind to move in that direction? There's dukkha there. So then I can see I don't really want to be associated with this kind of dukkha. It's not helpful. So in the end, we're learning to be our own teachers. We're learning the qualities of how to teach ourselves and encouraging ourselves in that way. And admittedly, I think it's not easy to step away from our own patterns, or the ways that we're used to treating ourselves, and to rise above that. It's kind of like this little engine. It's got a lot of work to do. It can be kind of overwhelming sometimes, in the beliefs that we can't do something, or we're not prepared to do it, or we're just utter failures. That can really be quite common and typical. But when we tap into our own resources, we do know that there is a potential, that the Buddha taught us that there was a potential, that our teachers teach us that there's a potential. Sometimes we have a sense that those who are our teachers believe in us more than we do. And so it's important to sometimes acknowledge their belief in us. Okay, well, maybe if they believe in me, I can believe in me. And we start moving into this, I think I can do it. And then we get a sense of, eventually, I know I can do this. And so that's where that really coming home feels comfortable to our own awareness. How it's referred to as an intuitive awareness, because we begin to trust ourselves, and we intuit, we understand, we get it, we feel it in our bones, what the right thing is to do, and then we do it. And we see the good results of it, and then we gain our confidence in that way. I don't say this particular thing I wanted to say, or I know that this particular movement of mine into this story is not going to help. This future, or this past obsession about some past event that I wish I could correct, or the version of me that didn't do it. So these are just some reflections about how we can really train ourselves to move in the right direction with our minds and to see clearly when we're essentially fooling ourselves, and how we can rise above that. We do have that potential. We should remind ourselves of that potential. Be able to really get that. I think I can do this. Because when we do have that sense of knowing what's right, it does have that reward of an understanding that this path is correct. This path is the right way to to move in. That's going to allow us to see clearly and to gain wisdom, to bring an end to suffering. So we're, they say, it's understood that stream entry is the complete conviction in the path for the ending of suffering. But it doesn't mean that we're not tasting the fruits along the way and gaining access towards that, gaining more and more confidence in that. We don't necessarily have to have this extreme view of, when I have complete conviction, then I'll be there. But until then, it's just a muddled, difficult thing. I don't know if I can really trust any of it. No, it's really along the way we're gaining more and more trust. I think I can begins to move into I know I can. But we have to also gain the confidence in that I think I can, the potential that we have. So I think I'd like to end it there. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I just wanted to answer one question from Marilyn about needing to let go of mastery. Well, yes and no. In terms of letting go, we want to let go of everything. So, but we do also need to hold on to certain things. So there is a picking up that we need to do sometimes. So if we let go of hatred, we need to pick up metta, right? So there's not always a sense of that letting go is the exact word of something or exact understanding. Surely I need to be a master, or I better become a master, or I have to do this, and that's what's also important. We need to look at that tendency of that overachiever. I better, I have to, But to know what it is, what we're actually doing in terms of gaining a skill, I would say that's very important for us to understand. We are training. We are moving towards a sense of clarity and understanding, which is how I would translate mastery. What do I do? How do I learn what to do so that I don't keep causing myself suffering? That's how I would define mastery, is getting more and more acquainted with that and more skillful so that the results are clear and we are gaining in wisdom and clarity, understanding, peace, calm. We know, as you're mentioning, when to let go, how to let go. So that is a sense of mastery. But it's the becoming around it that we want to be careful of. I have to be the master of my experience. I better get to be the supreme teacher, or whatever it might be. That's the difference, I think. So Patty's talking about reflection on being full of regret about an unskillful action. I think many of us have experienced that in our lives. Will you please say again how I can view that skillfully and not get stuck in dukkha? This is a hard one because sometimes we view, and I know I can do this, the need to, when we regret a unskillful action, to immediately go apologize and try to get ourselves back in the good graces of another person. And I can certainly see in my own experience how I fall into that mistake, because I really want to not have this unsettledness that I feel around how another person is with me. I'm hated by this person, or I'm not trusted by this person, or they no longer consider me a friend. There's an abandonment that goes on there. We're afraid of being abandoned by someone, which touches us very deeply. I mean, that, I think, goes back to just being born and spending many, many years with our parents and people who are guiding us, and feeling that if they're not there, what would we do? How do we take care of ourselves? So it's very deep, this sense of wanting to harmonize with others always, and not have those who we're in disharmony with, or those who have abandoned us or left us, or hate us, dislike us, don't trust us, because there was truly actions that we engaged in that were wrong. And sometimes there's not an opportunity to talk to these people again, and we have to live with that. That is truly painful. My own sense of that is that there can be sort of an obsessive quality with it, right? I really want to figure out how to talk to this person again, how to get in touch with them, how to help them understand that I'm not such a bad person, or just to apologize and acknowledge my wrongdoing, and so they know, like, I'm not just stuck in my ways, or I'm not thinking that I'm the one who is better in this situation. They clearly understand that I've understood my own folly in the matter. So what happens when that can't be done? Well, we live with that discomfort, don't we? That we've harmed someone else. And I think we have to get very much in touch with that sense of need that we have to acknowledge to another person what we've done wrong, to, as we think, like, what does that need to make up with them, to be back in their good graces, to feel that trust from them again. And when we don't have that, then we look at that very closely and, oh, that is so painful. But I think more painful is not seeing clearly that need that we have, and the sense of independence we can have from that when we say, well, this is just a particular need that my mind is moving, it's in this particular direction, it can't be met, so is it really skillful to drown myself in sorrows over this potential that I can't really right my wrong, or I can't win back somebody's trust, even if you do say something to them, even if you do apologize to them, they say, well, thanks for apologizing, but I don't care, it doesn't matter. We can't control others, we can't always reconcile. And so what do? We move into forgiveness. We forgive that person, and we forgive ourselves. And that's really all we can do. That's all we can ever really do. Because if we think that the answer is always going to be, if I apologize, and this person they think I'm trustworthy again. What is that? We're basing that on another person's sense of that. And of course, we do want people to trust us. Again, it's a very deep and innate feeling that we have. We want to be trusted. And if we're not, that can be quite upsetting. Imagine when a whole community doesn't trust you. So we come back to the Buddhist teachings on this. What is it that we are? We are our actions. And we don't want to mistake those actions for identifying with ourselves as a permanent being. What's mostly important is that we learn from our problems, and we see that we've harmed another person, and we don't want to do that again. This is hiriotapa. This is our sense of consciousness and concern, really, for our own actions. Why would I want to do that? That was really harmful the last time I did it. This is how people trust us. An apology is helpful sometimes, but we don't know where it's going to go. We can't really control another person. And so what we're doing is we're really trying to emphasize our own actions. Well, how do I deal with this now? So that, two ways, the main two ways I'm thinking of is, okay, I'm going to try to not do this again in the future. This is how people trust me. This is how people understand me, by my actions. Not by my apologies. The apologies, again, it's good, but it doesn't go so far as to really make a recorrection in terms of our orientation and what it is that we're doing and how we're going about our lives. And so what I'm emphasizing is a sense of really getting in tune with our heart and knowing about how much we're not forgiving ourselves for what it is we've done. And sometimes we don't forgive another person or a group of people for potentially feeling judgment for us. And so that's what we can do. We can forgive ourselves and we can forgive others. So that's sort of, I think, where we want to go. And the way that we do that also is just through our own awareness. Oh, this is so painful. Dealing with this regret is so painful. And just knowing that, yes, that was an unskillful action. That was unskillful. But because of that action, I am not the sum of that action. For my entire life is not the sum of that singular action. Yes, it was a mistake. So we need to be able to allow ourselves to make mistakes, to make a mistake like that. And maybe the person can understand us and forgive us, and maybe they can't. That's our secondary concern, really. The other person's forgiveness. That's their karma, whether they can forgive or not. I do think when one can make an apology and one really sincerely feels that apology, then it's helpful. It's helpful to do that. But to expect the response in the other person to be any particular way, we're falling into, again, like a sense of, I'm going to control my social environment so nobody hates me. We can think, oh, but I apologized. I said everything I did wrong. Why aren't you what? There's an expectation there. I want you to do something. I need something from you. I am expecting something from you. And that's the problem, is there's an expectation in the other person in our apology. So it's not genuine. A true acknowledgement of our wrongdoings to another person allows for their freedom to do whatever they want with that acknowledgement, including, who knows, they might have a very unskillful response. Often that happens. People start, because they were wounded, they were hurt by, you said something and they were hurt because of that, they might respond quite caustically I know you're apologizing, but that was really unkind. That was really hurtful. I don't trust you anymore. And, okay. But you can maybe, sometimes you can steer that in the right direction, that kind of conversation, and you can get to a place of understanding between another person. But I'm also emphasizing that it doesn't always work out that way. And so we want to be very careful with our expectation and why it is we're apologizing, why it is we are expressing our regret. So it's important to really be settled in our minds around, I'm going to acknowledge what I did, and the other person has a complete choice as to how they want to deal with that. They might say, I heard you acknowledge it, I don't want to talk to you. Okay. And it might work out much better. There might be real understanding between two people, real reconciliation that occurs, where two people completely understand each other, and that is the best of both worlds. Moving into our own forgiveness and the potential that someone genuinely does forgive us. But we can only count on the right here. And so that's where we want to put our focus. Forgiving ourselves, understanding our own actions, and knowing that we have choices to make in the future. And we don't need to beat ourselves up about our past decisions. We just need to make different decisions as we go along. Okay, be well. Have a good few days or a week. And be cognizant of, I think, these things that I was encouraging, how we can really encourage ourselves into our best modes of practice, but trying not to be too critical with ourselves at the same time. Move from that, I think I can, to I know I can, and thereby gain confidence in the path.